Welcome to the accent block for month 3 of the Stellar Stars block of the month. This sweet little block called Shadow Blossom is all machine applique. It's turned by hand, and I'm really looking forward to sharing this technique with you. My mom, Sharon Schamber, taught me this technique, which she uses on all of her applique quilts, well over 15 years ago, and it has continued to be one of my very favorite techniques to use for applique and to teach at different guilds and shows whenever I get the chance. This little block is going to be using our snow background fabric and gray that will be in the fabric bundle. It is the gray number 3. So in the introduction video, I kind of talked a little bit about how the grays are going to be distributed throughout the fabric bundles. And I will make sure to help you keep really organized and know which grays are coming when. And this particular gray, while there's only one in the bundle, it is gray number 3. You will end up with 6 different grays. So this is number 3. Number 1 and 2, 4, 5, and 6 will come with other months of your fabric bundles. We will also be using this yellow number 1, which is the lightest of your fabric bundle. So for getting started, I'm going to walk you through what all these supplies are here, and then we will just jump right into the technique, and I really hope that you enjoy it. So what I've got are my glues that I'm going to be using. It's the Elmer's washable school glue stick. This one is the purple. It goes on purple, it dries clear. There is a washable Elmer's school glue stick that goes on white and dries clear. That one works fine too. It just needs to say washable school glue stick. And then of course our Elmer's washable school glue with the microfine tip. If you don't have access to or just don't like using Elmer's, the Sew Line fabric glue pens will work just fine as well. They come with a blue glue. I think there's a pink also. So those will work fine. I really like these. It works really, really well, and they're much more cost effective, which is always nice. The other supplies here are our threads. This is silky monofilament. It's clear. It is a polyester monofilament. It works really well in virtually every machine I've used it and tested it on. Some machines are finicky with monofilament, so I would recommend testing it. Some monofilaments are made of rayon, so if you have used a monofilament in the past that your machine just really didn't like, check to see if you can, if it was rayon or not. That might be the case, why your machine didn't like it. The polyester doesn't stretch as much and it holds up to heat really, really well. And it is very durable over time, wear and use. So I highly recommend giving that a try. I do have that, of course, available in my shop. These 2 threads, this gray is in the piecing set for the Stellar Stars. It is the Silk Surfine number 2071. It can be used if you would like to color match instead of using the monofilament. This is the clear. It comes in smoke as well. But I most often just use the clear. I only use the smoke on really, really dark black, really dark brown fabrics. So this Surfine 2071, it can be used to color match. It doesn't match perfectly, but the fine thread, when we stitch this, you'll hardly see. The other Surfine, this comes in your monthly fabric and thread bundle, or just thread if you're getting that. And this is the Surfine 2674, and it matches the yellow quite nicely. Again, it's a fine thread, so when you're using it, it will blend right in. Now, what I love about this applique technique is the foundation paper that we are using. It is key. The foundation paper is a tearaway, but we are actually going to leave it in. And what is so special about it, and here's a little, it looks just like regular paper. The thing that is really special about it is once it's left in your piece and you quilt and you use it and and snuggle with it, it ends up very soft. So it stays in, you can quilt through it and around it, and it ends up getting really, really soft. And it almost gives a light trapunto effect to your quilt, which is really beautiful. So I'm going to highly recommend that you give it a try. And if you do, you can also use this technique and the foundation for virtually any applique pattern that's available or that you design yourself. If you do not prefer to do turned edge applique, you can use the templates that are with your pattern for raw edge as well. We are going to be using Schmetz machine embroidery needles. I have talked about these before. I use them in my piecing. They're really important for the applique because of all the reasons I stated before. They're ballpoint, the eye is polished, which is really important for that polyester monofilament thread, and they're heat tempered, so they work really nicely for doing the zigzag stitch that we will be doing for this technique. So I highly recommend giving those a try. If you haven't used them for piecing yet, they're going to be really helpful for applique for sure. I think that about covers it, except for my scissors, but you'll see me using those shortly. So we'll just jump right in. To start with, I have cut a 6 3/4 inch square from my background fabric. I have cut it big on purpose. When you're doing applique onto a background, it's really important to, and when you can, to use a background piece that is a bit larger than what you want it to finish as. So this block will be 6.5 inches unfinished, just like our Ohio Star accent blocks. But I cut this to 6 3/4 because sometimes when you're doing applique, you'll get a little draw of the fabric. It'll kind of pull in just a little bit and cause the background fabric to be a little bit smaller than it was to start with. So we can always trim it down. Much easier to trim it down than to try and make it bigger. So we'll trim it down to size after the applique is finished. So to prepare your background, we are going to do a finger press. You can use an iron if you'd like to, but you really don't need to. So finger press along the both centers, horizontal and vertical, so that you get a little line there. So we'll press along the other, matching your corners, and definitely match that fold there, because we are going to use those folds as registration marks for placing our applique. Some applique patterns require you to have a layout template that you would place underneath and see through and then place your pieces where they go. For this specific block, all we need are our folds as our registration points, and you're all set. So go ahead and place this aside, and we'll move on right to the applique. So in your pattern for the month are your template pieces. They're on a piece of paper just like this, or you'll print them onto a piece of paper just like this. They're on a PDF. And you'll print one copy, and this one piece of paper will be used for all 4 months that this block is made. We're going to make one for March, July, September, and November, so 4 blocks total. And we are going to use this to help us cut out our applique foundation. So to start with, just take a pair of scissors that you don't mind using for paper, and you're going to rough cut one of piece B, the bloom, and piece A. The other 3 will be used for the other 3 blocks. So go ahead and set this aside with your other Stellar Stars patterns so that you can use this for your future blocks for July, September, and November. So we have piece A and piece B, and we are going to go ahead and do the applique pieces for this. So you'll need that foundation paper. It's called Sharon's Secret Foundation. It's available in my shop. It was on the main supply list in the welcome PDF, so hopefully quite a few of you have already gotten it. If you haven't, you can order it and I'll get it shipped out to you just as soon as I can. This, some of the really important things about this foundation is that it's adhesive free. There's no fusibles, no glues, nothing bonding the fibers together that is an adhesive. The other is there's no right or wrong side. So without adhesives, you can really utilize both sides of this foundation paper, and you can fit pieces in and really get good use out of the amount of it. So what I would recommend doing is getting 4 layers of this. So what I mean by that is just simply folding your foundation paper into quarters. If you cut a piece that is about 8 inches large or 12 inches and you fold it in quarters, you're going to have plenty for both of these templates. So we need 4 of each pieces. So when you fold this into quarters and use 1 piece here, you'll get all 4 pieces you need for 1 block. So what that looks like is I'm going to place the template here. You can really nest it any way that you would like. So you can put it in there just like that. Get a stapler, and I'm going to staple this at both ends because this is a larger piece, so that anchors it down. Then I'm going to get my other little piece, and this one's smaller. I can get away with just 1 staple, staple it right in the middle, and now these are ready to cut out. So I'm going to use my favorite blue handled scissors, so like navy blue. I do carry these in my shop as well. I love them because of the nice big comfortable handle and the short blade, and it has a blunt tip, so where you stop cutting it actually stops. It doesn't go any further than that blunt tip. You know, sometimes when you've got really sharp scissors that have a long skinny point, it's hard to tell where it actually ends. Then we're going to go ahead and just rough cut this out of the bulk of the foundation. So you don't need a huge piece, but it does need to be 4 layers deep. And then we are going to go ahead and cut right along the inside of that template piece line. We are cutting off the line, or just cutting right at the edge of it, because when we turn the edges on this, that will help us to have a more accurately sized piece. If you left the black line on there and then put this on fabric and turn the edges around it, the bulk of your fabric will actually make the piece a little bit bigger than it was meant to be. So that is a really important little note to just pay attention to. See how you can hardly see any of those black borders around that piece. All right, do the same for piece A. I know I'm kind of working backwards, but it doesn't really matter which order you cut these in. And you should end up with 4 of each. Now I'm a righty, so I'm cutting counterclockwise. Lefties often will cut clockwise. So if you feel like you're cutting awkwardly, try cutting in the opposite direction. And you'll notice as I'm cutting, my hand is stationary. The one with the scissors is stationary. It's not moving. I am rotating the applique piece. I feel like I get a more accurate cut when I do it that way. So now I have my applique pieces all ready and cut. And then that's garbage. And now we're ready for our fabric. So we've got our gray number 3 that we're going to use for the shadow piece, piece A of our shadow bloom block. And when we cut that applique foundation folded into 4, then we have all 4 pieces we need for the 1 block. I have only lightly starched this fabric just 1 time. We don't want it too stiff because we'll be turning the edges, and when this fabric is stiff, it makes it more difficult to turn edges. So just 1 light spray if you need to, just to get any wrinkles out. And we'll go ahead and get our applique foundation pieces ready to go. So I have flipped over this piece, and this piece in particular is symmetrical. So by placing the template on the foundation, we have made duplicates of the piece, but we don't have to really worry about rights and lefts for this specific piece. If we were worrying about rights and lefts, then we would need to take some different steps for ensuring that when you put your piece to your fabric, that it ends up making a right when you want a right-sided piece and a left when you want a left. So since this is symmetrical, we don't have to worry about it here. But just in general, so this top will always be the right side of the piece, and the back here where the staples are coming off will be the wrong side. So if you kind of keep that in mind, to always orient it that way, it'll help to keep rights and lefts straight when you are working with rights and lefts. So I'm just using a cuticle stick here. You can use a stapler remover to lift up the staples, but I'm not going to take them out. This is just a little organizational tool that helps me not lose all of my applique pieces in my piles of creativity that I've got around here. So I'm going to take off one piece at a time. Just gently pull it away from the staples. Might need to pull those up. And I'm going to flip it over to what would be the front. So next I'm going to take my glue stick and prepare this with glue to put onto my fabric. So I'm going to show you a little trick real quick to help keep your surfaces clean. This is a little piece of freezer paper. You can just see it's got that shiny plastic coating. You can use Reynolds or anything you've got and just press it to your pressing table where you're going to be doing your applique. This gives you a little work surface to glue your pieces without getting glue all over the place. You could also just use a regular piece of paper and pin it down, but I really like using the freezer paper. It works really nicely. So we are going to glue these to the wrong side of your fabric. So if you're using a print or something else that has a specific right and wrong side, make sure your wrong side is up. We'll get our glue stick here, roll up a bit of the glue, and just about 1/4 of an inch around the edges, I'm going to paint on some glue. You don't need to cover the entire thing with glue. I know if you've followed me before or seen my other applique videos, you may have seen me fill in the whole piece. But usually the edges work really nice. You don't have to fill in the whole piece. And then place your piece on your fabric. Now this is applique. You can go off grain, you can go diagonal, you can be fussy about it and find a specific spot that you really like and use those colors or just the design that's there. So we're going to do that for all 4 pieces. Flip it over because that would be the top, because the glue is being placed on what would be the right side, because it's going to be going in the same direction as your right side of the fabric. So it's like right side to wrong side for these. Again, just around the edges. And if you forget to flip it over, don't worry, this piece is symmetrical. You only need to flip it over when you're doing rights and lefts. And do leave space in between, at least a finger width, to allow for space for trimming. So you can do all 4 at once, just like this. All right, and then see, that's one of my favorite little tricks. I kind of do it automatically, but I pull it up with the glue stick so I don't keep getting my fingers all gluey all the time. And then place that on there. Once all 4 are placed, take your hot iron and just heat set them so it's nice and dry. And like magic, that purple glue just turns clear. So now these are ready to trim. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same exact thing with piece B and our yellow number 1 fabric. So pull up those little staples. And on smaller pieces, if you fill up the whole thing with glue, it's not a big deal. I'm going to move this over. Sometimes with little pieces, you can't really get edges. It fills up the whole thing. So pop it up. that on there. And our last piece, squeeze it on in there. All right, heat set them in place. Okay, and now everything is ready to trim up. We'll put all of our supplies away, and we'll get to the trimming. So I'm going to go ahead and just rough cut this out of the big section of fabric. It's easier to manage that way. I'll do the same with the grays. Doesn't have to be pretty or perfect. All right, so now everything is ready to trim. I'm going to use my favorite blue-handled scissors. I highly recommend a short-bladed scissor for cutting these out. You get a lot more control. If I were going to try and do these, trim these with these big shears, it's not pretty. It really doesn't look good. It makes a mess, and I just don't get as nice of a cut as I do with my handy blue scissors. So I am going to just kind of rough cut these out. I just prefer that. Okay, so let's go ahead and start trimming these up. Put these aside. What I'm going to do here is leave an allowance for turning, a turning allowance. That is about 1/8 of an inch, maybe slightly bigger, but not too much bigger. What can be really helpful is that cuticle stick that I showed you earlier. It's going to be about the width of that cuticle stick. So if your seam allowance or turning allowance is about 1/8 of an inch or just about that cuticle stick width, you are set. If it's too thick, it's really hard to turn. And if it's too skinny, it's extremely hard to turn. Okay, so, and then I square off the tips just a little bit and then go around all the way around the edges. Now your edges don't have to be perfectly smooth. We're turning them, they'll be hidden. So it certainly doesn't have to be exactly just right perfection at all. So we'll do the same thing for all 8 pieces. Again, I am kind of keeping my cutting hand still, and I'm turning the piece as I cut it. It just helps me stay on a better path rather than trying to keep my hand turning and going do 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 do. That can be problematic. All right, I'm going to cut up the grays just the same way, and then we'll get them turned and put onto our background fabric. Our pieces are all cut out and ready to have the edges turned. I'm going to use the washable Elmer school glue stick for that job. If you only have Sew Line or other glue sticks, they can work. Just please make sure they are washable school glue, not Glue All or New and Better Hold or craft glue stick, because those will be really difficult to wash out. They'll leave icky gumminess around the edges, and I cannot guarantee positive results with any of those products, but if you use this one or even the Soline, I know they work great. They'll wash out wonderfully, and you won't be left with any icky goobers around the edges or in your quilt that you're not happy with. So to start with turning edges, take one piece of any of them. You can start however you like. And we're going to use the glue stick, roll it up a little bit, and we're going to paint the edges, the edge of the fabric and the edge of the foundation, and then we're going to turn one edge at a time. You could do glue all the way around both edges, but then you're going to get some gluey, sticky fingers from this other side, and it'll dry, so it's just much easier to do one side at a time. So we are going to go from end to end. I've got my freezer paper piece pressed to my pressing surface. Just really helps me utilize my pressing surfaces really well. And just paint it on just like that. And then starting at this tip, so you want to turn it over at that tip. So you can see there the turning goes as if there was a natural progression. It just kind of continued on through the edge of the fabric. Then I'm going to turn it in small pinches toward me. If you're a lefty, you're going to do the same thing, but just on the other side. And I do want you to notice how on the inside it's starting to ruffle, and this outside edge is nice and smooth. That's what I'm most concerned about, is this outside edge. I really don't care so much what's happening in here, and the fact that it's ruffling is just fine. That's telling me that it's starting to gather here, but it's smooth out on the outside edge. You could also use a stiletto, but what I am doing with my fingers is I'm doing like a pinch and roll kind of motion. So as I go, I'm moving the piece through my fingers. I'm not pinching and coming down. That often makes peaks and folds and icky things. So if you hold your dominant hand or whichever fingers you're using to pinch to do the little turning still, and then move your piece through those fingers as you go, you'll have a much better result. Give yourself some time. If you don't like it and aren't happy with the way that it turned, it's just tacked on right now. You could easily just pull this back. You can use a cuticle stick and then put glue on it again and do it again before it's heat set. See, and it'll just turn real nice. All right. So now we will flip to the other side. So flip that around. Glue from tip to tip. And then again, just as if the point continued naturally, you're going to turn this edge so it makes the point of where the point happened exactly where the foundation is. What happens often, at like the most common mistake, is when somebody's turning that point, they point the fabric seam allowance at the tip of that first turned edge rather than at the actual edge of the foundation. So it makes a weird point when that happens. So if yours does that on accident, don't worry, you can just undo it like I just did and fix it. So again, as you go, pinch and roll. I'm kind of going slower than I normally would to show you. And I'll go through a few more, and then I flatten out all the ruffles because this edge is nice and smooth now. So once you have that done, you can give it a little heat set. So you have your hot dry iron, and then it is ready for the next step. So let me run through a gray one for you. Same thing, it's the same piece, just bigger. Just glue on that outside edge. And then starting at that point, and again, just like it would continue straight through. And turn that edge nice and smooth in your fingers. So you'll feel inside your fingers as soon as the fabric hits the edge of that foundation paper. That way you're not folding the foundation paper over. And then I just smooth out those ruffles. You could do it with the iron too, but I like to do it with my fingers. And then just glue on the other edge. And same thing again. So since you're doing the same thing over and over again, you're going to get a good amount of practice with how to turn these edges. So see how that folded edge at the point just kind of folded over so nice right there. It almost matches. That's not going to happen every time. That's a little fluky. I love when that happens, but I'm going to show you what to do if that fold over doesn't match just so nicely like that did. So again, turn that edge all the way down. See, that one folded over nicely too. It'll happen sometimes, and I love when it does, but if it doesn't happen every time, don't worry. You didn't do anything wrong. All right, and then heat set that, and that piece is ready to applique. So this little guy will sit just on top of that guy on our background fabrics when we get ready to put them all together. All right, I'll run through a couple more and point out any other little tidbits of information. Oh, here's what I'm doing. Here's what I just did. The edge of my glue got a little gloppy, so I'm just kind of rolling it to smooth it out. No big deal, but that's what I was doing there. And again, just on that edge. If your fingers start to get a little gluey, just get a little wet rag to have nearby and just rub your fingers off on it. Okay, so what I'm doing again is that pinch and turning. Keep in mind that I am moving the applique piece through my fingers. I'm not bringing my fingers down. I have a lot more control that way. And I can start to go really fast. So the next one I'll just do in real time. So you can see once you get some practice down, that it goes pretty quick. Unfortunately, you can't pre-prep these and do glue, 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 turn, 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 turn. You do have to glue, turn, glue, turn. See, that one overlapped right there. So I'll show you how to manage that in a minute. So again, just as you go, let that ruffle if it's going to ruffle. And then that one is ready as well. And then heat set that. Okay, so the next one I'm going to show you just in real time how I do my own turning. When I'm just sitting, I'll sit and turn these at the TV when my husband and I are watching something at night after the kids go to bed. And it's just a nice, easy thing for me to do. So again, I just do that. They're also great to do on plane trips because you don't have to heat set immediately, or car trips. You could turn a bunch of them and just let them air dry too. See, they go really quick. See, that one overlapped as well. So I'll show managing that. But the last thing I want to show you is if your fingers aren't as dexterous as they've been in the past, for whatever reason, you can use a cuticle stick or a stiletto to help you turn your edges. So I'll show you how you can do that. This is also really good to use for tiny circles. My mom will do this with circles that are like a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch. So on a flat surface, after you have it glued, take the flat edge of your cuticle stick and kind of smooth it over. And with one of your fingers of your other hand, just kind of make sure you didn't make any folds. So this can go pretty quickly too once you get the hang of it. And the flat edge just kind of helps smooth things out. So that's another strategy you can use if you want to try it. If you're just not turning as good as you want to, or your fingers just aren't as nimble as they used to be. So I'll show you again. So when you're doing that corner, you're going to fold that over, and do make sure with your fingers, feel it, that it gets right up against that foundation, and then go ahead and use the stick to turn it. All right, and then you can heat set that. Okay, I'll get the last few turned, and then we will have everything ready for our block. This really is my favorite way to applique. I have another technique for raw edge applique that I learned from my mom. It's in our old applique book that came out, gosh, 11 years ago through AQS, called Piece by Piece Machine Applique. We also have patterns on it, but I'll show that another time on how to do the raw edge, because it's a really fun technique too, and it doesn't use any fusibles, so you get a really soft finish when it's quilted. You know how fusibles will leave it kind of flat looking. Our technique leaves it looking really alive and really wonderful. All right, one more to go. And then we're all set. So before I squared off those tips, and the reason I did that is it allows that point to be a little bit more manageable, and I don't have so much fabric left over. You know, it doesn't get so bulky. All right, last side, and then I'm going to show you those points, and then we'll lay them out on our block. Okay, so heat set that. I think I forgot to do the other one. You can always heat set it again if you feel like you forgot or aren't sure. Okay, I'm going to put my glue stick away. Next, we're going to work with those points when there were overlaps. So we will get those fixed up. For example, that when there's a little overlapping part. I'm going to use a product called Liquid Stitch. It is a permanent fabric glue. It dries clear and flexible. It's actually the product that I use in that raw edge applique technique I was mentioning. So I guess I'm going to have to do a tutorial or video on it now to share it with you all. It is a really great tool and product to use when you need a permanent glue solution. And I also use it for glue basting zippers into bags because it's tackier than the Elmer's and it stays in. I mean, with the zipper, it doesn't matter if it washes out or not, really. So I really like that because it is a little thicker, it's tackier, and it will secure any fraying, which is what we're going to do with these points. So you can use fray check. I don't really like fray check. I don't like how it will crack fabric and cause some discoloration. So I really like this because it dries clear, there's no discoloration, and it just works really well. I do put the microfine glue tip on it because the main, or the blue cap that it comes with, the glue comes out in a big, huge, gloppy mess, which I don't prefer. So I like to put the tip on it and then make sure you always plug it up because this is permanent glue, and if it dries out, it's really hard to unclog. So just squeeze out a little puddle. You don't need much. Just make sure you plug it back up. And you're done. All right. So again, I do have this in my shop. You can also get it at Joann's and other fabric stores. At Joann's or other fabric stores as well, and it's a great product to have around the house or studio or your sewing room. So what I'm going to do first is anytime that there's a little overlap, you can do one of two things. You can dip it in the glue just a little bit, and then take your cuticle stick and fold that little overlap over so that it's not peeking out the front. So you can do that. That is nice to do when your fabric isn't very bulky. And then make sure you heat set that so it doesn't undo. So now it's not, you can't see the overlap anymore. The other option, I do this most often, is kind of pull up your fold a little bit, that overlapping fold, and take your scissors and just snip it off without snipping off the tip. Don't do that. Whew. That can happen, but don't do that. So just snip off the overlapping part so you can't see it anymore in the front. I can still see it a little bit. There we go. And then dip it in the glue, because now you have fraying that's really close to the edges, and you don't want it to fray more when you're stitching and you're at that point and the needle kind of separates the fibers. It can cause it to fray more. So this liquid stitch will secure those fibers so that doesn't happen. And then heat set it, and then you are all ready to sew that down. So I'll do one more. I'll do it on the yellow. So again, just for clipping it, peel it back. I'll clip it kind of, I'll nest my scissors right at the point so I don't clip my point off. And then dip it in the glue a little bit, kind of rub it in, and then heat set it. You can do that fold back too, if you prefer the look of it. I'll show that one more time. So kind of pull that back a little bit, dab on some glue, fold it over, and then heat set that. If your fabric, if your fabric is thicker or bulkier, that can make, folding it over can make your point more accentuated in your applique. So consider that as well if you don't mind the accentuated point, or if you want your point to really blend in, then maybe the clipping is a better option for you. So I'm going to go ahead and get all the points taken care of on all of my petals here, and then we will go ahead and lay out the petals on the background and get them all ready to applique.